Good day, ladies, gents, anyone tuning into this video. We're going to continue Chapter 1, Ecosystems. I guess that's my favorite science. It's coinciding with biology. Let's put that in brackets. Biology, happy face. That's a weird looking eye. Ignore. Whatever. Anyways. We're going to talk about energy flow today. Now, energy flow, when you think about science, you really do think about circuits, electricity, and things like that. But this is specifically within organisms, so I should probably put that in here. Organisms. Anyways, it's April 18th, the day I'm making the video. This is for my grade 9 science class, but anyone looking for information, welcome aboard. It's Mr. Benjamin here. And I've run out of room for my name. That's how you pronounce it anyways. Benjamin, so it's okay. Learning goals. You're going to describe, or I should say we are going to describe, the transfer of energy in an ecosystem. So previous video we talked about ecosystems, what they are, all the key terms associated with them, different kinds of ecosystems. We'll get more into detail on the organization of life in a future video, but for now we're specifically going to look at food chains. Now food chains you've done in the past, at least I'm hoping you've done in the past, so you have a general idea of how they work, but we'll try to get into a bit more detail. Second learning goal, is to define and describe photosynthesis, which may or may not be a new word, and cellular respiration, which, again, may or may not be a new word. These two are, what's the word I'm looking for, linked, they coincide with each other eternally. One cannot exist without the other, so it's very important to understand how both work. In fact, if you understand how one works, you're probably going to understand how the other works. Finally, it's defining key terms associated with energy flow. There is a lot of key terms for this unit, as I've mentioned previously. That, unfortunately, is the nature of the beast, no pun intended, for biology, for ecosystems. So, let's begin. Quick recap on food chains. A food chain shows the feeding relationship, which is a weird thing to say, among organisms within an ecosystem, okay? So, most of these food chains that you see won't necessarily have humans in them because humans don't exist in an ecosystem with what they consume. Very few people live with the chickens they eat, for example. Or if you're eating beef, they don't necessarily live with a cow. They usually go out and buy it. So that's not necessarily relevant. What you're going to be thinking about is plant life being consumed by wildlife. And that's basically what a food chain is. Now, very important part, an arrow dictates energy flow. Okay? So the direction of the arrow indicates where the energy is going. So you'll never see an arrow pointing towards grass coming from an animal. That would mean the grass is eating the animal. And unless you live on a different planet, I've never seen grass eat an animal. Okay? So you will always see an arrow pointing from the organism that's being consumed towards the organism consuming it. So for example, if this is grass, might not look like grass, might look like some of my writing actually. Grass. The arrow will point to, I don't know, a cow. That means grass, or a cow eats grass. Cow eats grass. Okay? You would be extremely surprised as to how many people get that wrong. It's such a common thing. Anyways. Coincides with the whole neutron being neutral instead of negative thing. Alright. A food web is the same as a food chain, however, it shows multiple organisms and multiple feeding relationships. So, again, this grass could be eaten by a cow. The grass could also be eaten by, I can't really think of another animal that eats grass. I'm just going to write a squirrel. Squirrel. Okay, I know squirrels don't eat grass, but whatever. This would be more of a web because grass is leading to multiple, let me draw these in white, organisms. Okay, multiple flows of energy. Here are some examples of food chains, okay? So this would be one food chain, this would be another food chain, this would be the last food chain. There are going to be specific terms associated with each organism involved. For example, these three here, these are all called producers. Okay, I'm going to define that in the next slide, but keep that in mind. This first set of organisms here, these are called primary consumers. Okay? the second set, and in this case, the owl is the last one here. These are secondary consumers. Oh, no, what color haven't I used? I can't really use white here, can I? No, white doesn't work. I'll go back to green. The python and the lion, these are tertiary consumers. And the eagle is also tertiary, but we're going to call it a top consumer at this point. Okay. Keep all of these in mind as we define them. You can always refer back to the images to look at them. One thing I wanted to point out, actually, this middle section here. Okay. Rabbit eats carrot. Shouldn't draw the arrow there. Fox eats rabbit. Lion eats fox. Where do lions and foxes live in the same area? I don't know. I've never seen that, but whatever. So, starting off with our key terms. A producer. Keep in mind, these are your producers. They all have one thing in common. They're all plants. They perform photosynthesis. That's a weird, long word. I'll explain what that is later. But they're generally plants, okay? Producers, 99.99% of the time, don't necessarily eat anything, okay? So, do not consume organisms. Consume means to eat, of course. A consumer, just a general consumer, okay, will eat other organisms for energy, as opposed to a producer, which creates their own energy, okay? I'll write that here. Creates own energy. All right? Going back to our consumers, there's multiple levels of consumers. Primary, secondary, and tertiary. The primary consumers will eat the producers, okay? The secondary consumers will eat the primary consumers. The tertiary consumers will eat the secondary consumers. Okay, so if we were drawing arrows, that would go there, and that would go there. Remember, the arrow indicates the energy flow. Energy. All right? More key terms. I think this is the second of third slides. A herbivore. These are things you should have heard before. Herbivore, ha 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 ha. Not funny, I know. These only consume plants. So you can think of vegetarians, but it's not necessarily true. Vegetarians or vegans would be slightly more accurate, because vegans only consume plant life or plant material. A carnivore. Carnivores in red. This only consumes animals or other organisms, but specifically animals. Okay, no plants. A lot of people like to think A lot of people like to think they are carnivores. However, they are not. An omnivore consumes both. Let me get the blue out. Consumes both plants and animals. Okay, so humans, for example, most humans at least, are omnivores. Some humans can be herbivores. Some humans. Okay, but most humans will be omnivores because we consume both plants and animals. Even more key terms. Key terms is the only important part here. Two different types of organisms that fall underneath these same categories, but they have their own unique category. A scavenger. Scavenger won't hunt. We'll put that here. Won't hunt. Okay, maybe you can call them lazy. A scavenger consumes remains or quote-unquote leftovers of dead animals. The most prototypical type of scavenger is a vulture. This one actually looks pretty cool, but most vultures look kind of weird. You might see turkey vultures by the side of the road depending on where you live. We get a lot of them where we live. The other type is a decomposer. Okay, these are specifically bacteria and fungi. So when other organic material is dead or is passed, decomposers will break down organic material and release the nutrients back into the ecosystem, okay? So once we die, our bodies will decompose. They'll go into the ground, will be consumed by these decomposers, and life will grow from it. It's actually a brilliant process, the way everything works. This image right here, you can probably tell it's some mushrooms or fungi growing out of a dead tree. Now, if you can't see it, it is right here. Some fungi right here. So, decomposer. We're going to say that the tree is the dead material. I'll write it down here. Dead I should put dead organic material. I'm going to write that. Organic material. And although the fungi is growing out of it, let me draw that in white. You can also see there's perhaps a spruce-like organism growing out of there. So we're going to write new life. Those are both, at least to me, they're both growing out of the same tree. So because these mushrooms, this fungi, is breaking down this tree, new life can grow. It's amazing. At least I think it's amazing. Energy pyramids. I think this is the last of our food chain talk. Energy pyramids. Okay. See, this is a pyramid right here, right? Just like the Egyptians had. Now, in an energy pyramid, or one thing to keep in mind, in any food chain, let me go back here, as I pass through, only 10% of energy is continuing, okay? I'll explain why that is, but I'm just going to write these in. 10%, 10%, 10%. Where do we go? All right. So if the beginning of our food chain was these freshwater shrimp, shrimp is delicious, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to eat. These shrimp would be consumed by these bleak. I don't know what bleak are. Someone who knows fish might know what bleak are. You can see this number is going from 10,000 to 1,000. These bleak might be eaten by perch. I know what perch is. Perch is another fish. These northern pike, these perch would be consumed by these northern pike. And you can see it's only 10 of them. And then, I don't know what this last one is, osprey, but it's one of them. So, anyways, mathematicians will tell you that, only 10% is going up each time. Okay? The reason for that is that 90% of all energy is lost as you move up a food chain or move across a food chain. Only 10% of the energy flows. It's a very easy value to remember because that equals up to 100%. Why does this happen? Loss due to, one of the big thing is predation. Now that's the predator and prey relationship, right? So a predator will consume its prey. So I'll write predator. I'll put greater than prey. Now for this predator to eat its prey, it needs to hunt it. Hunting takes energy. If you've ever seen one of those videos, BBC's Life is one of my favorite documentaries. The animal that's performing the hunting stalks its prey. It waits for the right time, right position. It doesn't just walk over to it and go, hey, Mr. Zebra, can I eat you? And it doesn't work that way. So it has to spend energy. Loss of energy. Better way of saying it is energy spent. Hunting, okay? Hunting requires energy, so it's going to lose a lot of energy. Now, that hopefully makes sense. Another reason is competition. There are multiple groups of animals in the world, multiple of the same species. Now, some of them, if they're related, they're going to look out for each other, they're going to share their food. Otherwise, most animals aren't going to share. It's not like one animal goes, I didn't catch anything today, can I maybe have some of your food? The other animal will probably fight it and tell it to go away, right? That's one of the things that separates us from the animals. In many cases, it doesn't separate us from the animals, but, either way. Another thing, it's going to be a long one, metabolic processes. Breathing requires energy. Moving requires energy. Thinking, seeing, going to the washroom, all of these things require energy. We don't necessarily think about that. We only think about having energy or needing energy when we're tired or when we're hungry. But everything we do in life, everything you do, just keeping yourself alive requires energy. Okay, these are all metabolic processes. And all of this stuff requires you to stay full and filled with energy, so we lose a lot of energy. Where does all of our energy come from? Well, I don't know what it looks like for you outside right now, but it's really dark. It's actually raining for me. But if it was a nice day, we would see this big circular thing, often drawn with lines out. The sun doesn't actually look like this, but the sun. All energy, in fact, all life, okay? Where does all the life come from? All of that comes from the sun. All of our food, I'll write that in green, comes from the sun. How? Well, So glad you asked. Photosynthesis. This is one of those longer words you may or may not have heard of. The process at which plants, specifically plants, humans can't take part in photosynthesis. One day, hopefully we will, it'll be really cool. But plants use three things. So first is the sun's energy. Second is water. And finally, let me get my red back out, carbon dioxide, CO2. Carbon dioxide. We're all pros at naming now, right? So, to create sugar in the form of glucose. Okay? The formula for this process, all right, I'm going to put this on the next page and we'll talk about it a bit more. But the formula, sunlight plus water plus CO2, gives you, or yields, that's what this arrow means, leads to, gives you, yields, whatever you want to call it, glucose, which is sugar, which is C6H12O6, and O2, which is oxygen. Now, the hand might be in the way here, so we'll go to this next page. Here's our formula again. Sunlight plus water plus CO2 gives us sugar and oxygen. This is why all plants need to be watered. Plants need to be watered. And most plants, I'd say probably 80% of the plants we can think of that we see on a day-to-day basis, need sunlight. Sunlight. There are many plants that can live without sunlight. They usually don't, they'll become a different color. They're white usually because they don't have chlorophyll, which is green. Don't need to worry about that necessarily right now. But plants also need CO2, and humans actually breathe this out. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. Plants breathe in CO2 and breathe out oxygen. Pretty cool. Another big word, another process that you might not know about, cellular respiration. The process at which organisms, plants and animals, looks like I crossed up in, combine O2, oxygen, and glucose, sugar, to produce energy, usable energy, I'll write usable here, water, and CO2. Okay? The formula, I'll write that. Formula, glucose plus oxygen gives you energy, water, and CO2. Now, if you think back to this formula here, it was sunlight plus water plus CO2 gives you glucose and oxygen. If I look at this one again, glucose and oxygen. Wait a minute. Glucose and oxygen? Oh my gosh, that's so weird. All right. The reason is they are connected. That looks like connected, but it's two N's, trust me. I'll erase and write them again. How are they connected? What's the connection? So, if you look at this first image here, the images are the exact same, if I'm honest. There's different ways of looking at them. Photosynthesis, which occurs in plants, requires energy from the sun most of the time. It also requires water. Okay? What this gives you, and CO2, What this gives you is glucose, follow the arrow, and oxygen comes out. Okay? Glucose is sugar. Let me write that underneath. Sugar. Humans and plants perform cellular respiration. Cellular respiration requires glucose. See how glucose is going in? And so is oxygen in this case? Oxygen's also going in. This gives you ATP. This is called adenosine triphosphate. We are just going to call it, because that's too long, and this is grade 9, we're just going to call it usable energy. This is all the energy we need to survive. So our body's performing cellular respiration at all given times of the day, even when you're asleep. Okay? The products of cellular respiration, what you lose, if you come over here, CO2 leaves our body because we breathe it out. Exhale. I know it's one word, but easier to write that way. And water. We actually lose water every time we perform cellular respiration. We consume water to replenish ourselves, but we lose it as well. Those products go into plants and photosynthesis happens. So it's a cycle. Okay? This image, exact same, but it just shows a plant. It shows chlorophyll and chloroplast, but don't worry about that. As well as a rabbit, which is an organism. And it shows the exact same processes. ATP coming out, etc., etc., etc. We are at just under 20 minutes now. In fact, we just passed the 20-minute mark, so we're going to end the video here. We're going to say thank you. Kind of getting tired of the green on green, so maybe I'll find a new color. What color haven't I used? How about gray? Sounds gray. Gray looks pretty cool. Thank you. Hope everyone's doing well and have a fantastic day.